Okay, class, let's do the first part or the first question of the stop and ask, read three together. So, the very first page on the stop and ask gives you some instructions. I've included a very brief YouTube video on how to download or make a copy of a forced copy and on how to rename your slides in the from the Google Drive app on your iPad. Okay, so I've done all of that. You see in the top right corner, my document is no longer called copy of stop and ask. It has my name and the class periods. Okay, the latter half of the instructions tell you how to download your finished assignment as a PDF and how to submit that assignment. So make sure you look at the highlighted portions to submit or to save and then submit. So, for the sake of copyright issues, we cannot, or copyright laws, we cannot listen to the full story together on the recording, but I am going to listen to enough for the first question. So, if you look at the first question, it says, think about paragraphs 1 through 5 on page 50. That's your very first page. This is just a daydream. So that portion, so not all of that is a daydream. Part of that includes a daydream. So paragraphs 3 and 4 are just a daydream. So think about the daydream. What does this daydream reveal about mama's relationship with D? And then if you look down to the second question, it's the same exact question, but we want to know what does the daydream reveal about mama's relationship with Maggie? So I am going to answer the first question for you and show you how to use your race strategy. So let's listen.
Everyday use for your grandmama.
Let's pause for just a second. So, as I listen, I don't want to keep looking at this document. I need to look at my actual story. So, I'm double tapping the home button here on the iPad, and I'm going to go to my everyday use story in my files in my English folder. I've written all over it and highlighted all over it. Now, let's listen.
By Alice Walker. I will wait for her in the yard that Maggie and I made so clean and wavy yesterday afternoon. A yard like this is more comfortable than most people know. It is not just a yard. It is like an extended living room. When the hard clay is swept clean as a floor, and the fine sand around the edges lined with tiny, irregular grooves, anyone can come and sit and look up into the elm tree and wait for the breezes that never come inside the house. Maggie will be nervous until after her sister goes. She will stand hopelessly in corners, homely and ashamed of the burn scars down her arms and legs, eyeing her sister with a mixture of envy and awe. She thinks her sister had held life always in the palm of one hand, that no is a word the world never learned to say to her. You've no doubt seen those TV shows where the child who has made it is confronted as a surprise by her own mother and father, tottering in weakly from backstage. A pleasant surprise, of course. What would they do if parent and child came on the show only to curse out and insult each other? On TV, mother and child embrace and smile into each other's faces. Sometimes the mother and father weep. The child wraps them in her arms and leans across the table to tell how she would not have made it without their help. I have seen these programs. Sometimes I dream a dream in which Dee and I are suddenly brought together on a TV program of this sort. Out of a dark and soft-seated limousine, I am ushered into a bright room filled with many people. There, I meet a smiling, gray, sporty man like Johnny Carson, who shakes my hand and tells me what a fine girl I have. Then we are on the stage, and Dee is embracing me with tears in her eyes. She pins on my dress a large orchid, even though she had told me once that she thinks orchids are tacky flowers. In real life, I am a large, big-boned woman with rough, man-working hands. In the winter, I wear flannel nightgowns to bed and overalls during the day. I can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. My fat keeps me hot in zero weather. I can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver, cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes steaming from the hog. One winter, I knocked a bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer and had the meat hung up to chill before nightfall. But of course, all this does not show on television. I am the way my daughter would want me to be, 100 pounds lighter, my skin like an uncooked barley pancake. My hair glistens in the hot, bright lights. Johnny Carson has much to do to keep up with my quick and witty tongue. But that is a mistake. I know even before I wake up. Whoever knew a Johnson with a quick tongue? Who can even imagine me looking a strange white man in the eye? It seems to me I have talked to them always, with one foot raised in flight, with my head.
Okay, so let's pause here. I'm going to refer back to my question. So, yes, there will be some back and forth. So, again, the question asked me to think about those paragraphs 1 through 5 and to think about the daydream. What does the daydream tell us about Mama's relationship with D? And I need to use textual evidence to support my response. Now, if you have done your highlighting, you have already written a lot of things about Mama and about D. So my paper is kind of messy, and I like to tell students that when we're reading our papers, our stories and essays, they won't stay pristine or clean, that they will get messy because we need to actively read. We need to mark up the text and take notes so we'll have things to look at, okay? So first, let's go back to the daydream. So I cannot just answer the question right now. I kind of need to reread it for myself. So I'm going back to the start of the daydream. So before Mama tells about her actual dream, Mama tells us about the TV shows. Okay, so Mama's daydream is a comparison to the TV shows that she tells us about. So let's go to paragraph 3. And also notice, just as an aside, that I have numbered my paragraphs, okay? I forgot to tell you guys to do that. I normally tell my students to number their paragraphs. We normally do that in class together, but I failed to tell my virtual students to number their paragraphs. So my apologies for that. If you have not done so, number your paragraphs, okay? So that's how I can keep up with which paragraph I'm on. So I'm going to go back to paragraph 3, and I'm going to read that. You no doubt seen those TV shows where the child who has made it is confronted as a surprise by her mother and father, tottering in weakly from backstage. A pleasant surprise, of course. What would they do if parent and child came on the show only to curse out and insult each other? On TV, mother and child embrace and smile into each other's faces. Sometimes the mother and father weep. The child wraps them in her arms and leans across the table to tell how she would not have made it without their help. I have seen these programs. Okay, pardon my reading. My contacts are doing something. So let's take a look at this, okay? So you see that I underlined some things as I was following along with the recording. So the TV show is always about a child who has made it. So I underlined that. So made it. That child is successful. They have come up from their poor upbringing and they have made something of themselves. Like they've achieved a status that says success, okay? So I underlined that. But then I also underline the word confronted, because when I think of the word confronted, I think of a negative word, like you would confront someone if they had done something wrong, but the child here has made it. So I underline those two things. And then we go on. The child is being confronted by her mother and her father. And then I underlined that the mother and father come in weakly from backstage. So the mother and father are weak or not as strong and vibrant as they could be because of what they have done to help the child make it. And we know that because at the end, the child wraps them in her arms and leans across the table to tell how she would not have made it without their help. Okay, so these are the shows that Mama is comparing her daydream to. Now let's read paragraph 4 to see what happens in Mama's daydream. Sometimes I dream a dream in which Dee and I are suddenly brought together on a TV program of this sort. So now we know that Mama's daydream is similar to the TV shows because she says of this sort, which is why I underlined that. Out of a dark and soft seated limousine, I am ushered into a bright room filled with many people. There I meet a smiling, gray, sporty man like Johnny Carson who shakes my hand and tells me what a fine girl I have. Then we are on stage and Dee is embracing me with tears in her eyes. She pins on my dress a large orchid, even though she has told me once that she thinks orchids are tacky flowers. So let's pause here. So in Mama's daydream, she and Dee are reunited, and Dee is so thankful. How do we know Dee is thankful? Because Mama says that Dee has tears in her eyes. So Dee is so thankful to Mama for all she has done for Dee, okay? Now, how do we know that this daydream goes against who Dee really is? Because Mama tells us that Dee would pin an orchid on her, even though Dee has told her in real life that orchids are tacky. So the daydream does not really match who Dee and Mama are together in real life. But let's keep going because my instructions for the question also include paragraph number 5. So let's read paragraph 5. In real life, it begins. Okay, so now we know that Mama is back from the daydream and this is real life things. Okay, so everything we read from this point on, we know that those things are true, that they're facts because this is real life. We're no longer daydreaming. In real life, I am a large, big boned woman with rough, man working hands. In the winter, I wear flannel nightgowns to bed and overalls during the day. I can kill and clean a hog as mercilessly as a man. My fat keeps me hot in zero weather. I can work outside all day, breaking ice to get water for washing. I can eat pork liver cooked over the open fire minutes after it comes steaming from the hog. One winter, I knocked a bull calf straight in the brain between the eyes with a sledgehammer and had the meat hung up to chill before nightfall. But, of course, all this does not show on television. I am the way my daughter would want me to be 100 pounds lighter, my skin like an uncooked barley pancake, my hair glistens in the hot, bright lights. Johnny Carson has much to do to keep up with my quick and witty tongue. Now, notice on my paper that I circled the word but. Every time you see but, it presents a contrast. It presents something that's different from something else. So Mama begins paragraph 5 by telling us that she is nothing in real life as she is in her daydream. That in real life, she is a rough and tough woman who can do anything a man can do, and that she is a very strong woman. So she tells us all these things about what she can do, about her strength, her capabilities. But then there is the contrast, but she says none of that was shown on television because on television, she will be the way her daughter really wants her to be. So let's look at how Dee wants Mama to be. Dee wants Mama to be lighter, as in not as heavy. She wants her to be more thin. She also wants her skin to be more fair. She doesn't want her to have very dark skin. And she wants her hair to be nice and shiny and glistening. So she wants her to have beautiful hair. And Dee will want Mama to be smart and quick-witted so that she could have very good conversation with Johnny Carson. Okay, so D would basically want mama to be the total opposite of who she is. Now, let's put these things together. So, in the daydream, there's always a kid who's made it. On the TV shows, there's always a kid who's made it. So in Mama's daydream, D is the kid who's made it, and she will come back to thank Mama for all she had done. Now all of that is great, but the only problem is that in Mama's daydream, Mama cannot look like herself. She must look like someone different, and she must talk like someone different, because that's what D wants her to be, different. So let's go back to the question. So the question says, what does this daydream reveal about Mama's relationship with D? And it tells us to use text evidence to support our answer. Now, highlighted in white, it says to remember race. Okay, so race, I need to restate my question. So I'm going to begin my answer by saying the daydream shows us that Mama's relationship with D is. Okay, so now I need to think about what is Mama's relationship with D. So I definitely don't think that Mama has a good relationship with D, because if Mama did have a good relationship with D, D could accept her as she is. I do think that Mama is a good mama, but I don't think that Mama is exactly who D wants her to be. So I'm going to say, in very simple terms, the daydream shows us that Mama's relationship with D is not a good mother-daughter relationship. Mama is a good mama. Put mother. Mama is a good mother because she has helped D achieve success. And now let's insert some textual evidence to support that we know Mama has helped D achieve success. So back to the story, I want to go to paragraph 3 that says D is embracing me with tears in her eyes. She pins on a large dress, pins on my dress a large orchid, even though she has told me that she thinks orchids are tacky flowers. Okay, so now how do we know that D is appreciative to Mama because of what she's done for her? This is in the daydream now. We know this because D is hugging Mom with tears in her eyes, and Mama has already told us that the kids hug the parents in those shows because they're so appreciative for all they've done. So now I'm not going to quote that. I'm going to put that in my own words, and so I don't need any quotation marks. Readers know D is appreciative because she hugs because she has tear-filled eyes while hugging Mama. Now let's talk about D. D, on the other hand, has not been the best daughter because she cannot accept Mama for who she is. And now I need some textual evidence. The narrator explains that In the daydream, Mama is, and I want to insert a quote here, so I need to go back and look. So I'm going to paragraph 5. Is the way my daughter will want me to be. Let's quote that. And I'm going to explain that. This quote and the section following shows that Mama does not look like or talk as Dee would want her to. Dee does not accept Mama for who she is. Now, my answer might be a little bit more lengthy than yours would actually be, but I do want you to make sure, and you don't have to answer as lengthy, but look at everything I did. I talked about who Mama is, I talked about who Dee is, and I gave textual evidence and explained my answer. So in order for you to completely do race, you cannot have a one sentence answer and do race. Now you would need to go back and listen and reread and do the same thing for Maggie. So this is not an assignment that you can do in maybe 5 minutes, because it's going to take some time for you to read and reread and stop and think about what you've read and be able to put that in a short answer format. As always, if you have any questions or you need anything, please do come into the live session.